Hey guys, welcome to TCRS in Arizona. I thought I was going to be doing this from California, but I'm already in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm not, as you can kind of see, I have been moving around. So, welcome. It's been quite a while since I've done a live stream. Um, I want to ask you guys, how many of you are watching or following the trial of Laurie Vallow and Letecia Stalk? How many of you have sort of followed both of them? So according to the poll, I see 34% have voted for Letecia Stalk, I guess. Laurie Vallow, 24%. Alex Murdaugh, 24%. Gabby Petito, 13%. It's kind of an unfair question because every true crime case is a great tragedy. So it's really unfair to sort of compare them. But if we're talking about body count, then I think the Vallow case is the undisputed champion. Alex Murdaugh, comes close, and I guess you could even make an argument that it's even worse. We don't know what happened to the housekeeper. What has surprised me is that the Laurie Vallow case isn't a more high-profile crime. I've really, really been surprised. Sitting in court, I'm surprised that Laurie Vallow isn't treated like Nicole Ketchinger, only much, much worse, right? Nicole Ketchinger was suspected of being involved in something, but she didn't kill like her husband. And there wasn't like some kind of conspiracy involving still a third person. So it's just quite strange how Nicole Ketchinger, as the other woman, was so reviled, yet Laurie Vallow, who kind of was also the other woman, except anyway, I just find it really, really surprising that Laurie Vallow kind of got a pass in terms of the way that Nicole Ketchinger was treated. I was really, really surprised at that. I think in a way Laurie Vallow is just dismissed as cuckoo. So she's cuckoo, so everything else is fine. And I find that quite interesting how when you have male perpetrators, we had Chris Watts and we had I'm not sure why this keeps going out. We had Chris Watts, we had Brian Laundrie, and no one really sort of makes the case that they are mentally ill. And yet, with both Laurie Vallow and Letecia Stalk, their defense is basically something like that, right? That's very much part of the narrative, whether you think they are innocent or not. I just find it quite interesting how you have that difference of opinion. I don't know what you guys think of that. So Zircon says it's because it's not on video, and so you kind of got to wonder. So is it a failure of the imagination? So if it's not, yeah, I guess if it's not on video, then do you not care about it? Is it not real? And I think that is the answer. If you don't see it on your YouTube screen, then it doesn't actually. There's a saying: if a tree falls in the forest, but no one witnesses it, well, then it didn't fall in the forest, but actually it did. Anyway, so I must have been contemplating things like that a lot during my journey. Paik says no TV coverage on Vallow trial. Vallow is just so convoluted and twisted, it was hard to follow. But I mean, I think that's another way of looking at it. you know, if it's hard to follow, then do you not follow it? You know, if it's difficult to understand, if it's three people died and it's easy to understand, then you pay attention to it. But if 8 people died or 12 people died, well, it's too difficult to understand. You know what I mean? I mean, isn't that perhaps the reason why serial killers get away with as much as they do? It's just so difficult to comprehend. You know, like Jeffrey Dahmer. Thanks for your comment, Paik. No, I don't live in the USA. In fact, I'm going back home in about 3 weeks. I've already booked my ticket. Lorraine says, if not on video, it's hard to relate to what is being said. Have you ever watched live tweeting? Have you ever looked at that? And then people are putting up reports constantly as well. To be honest with you, I find it a little bit frustrating that there is the sort of idea, if it's not on video, I'm not going to pay any attention to it. And then I've gone all the way from South Africa to Boise. Because there's not a camera, I've gone into the courtroom to tell you what's been going on. And I kind of have the impression, sorry, it's not on camera, I'm not really interested. I'm interested. I'm interested in terms of my interest in the case. But I must say I was a little bit surprised. The Laurie Vella case has been quite surprising in a number of ways. I think another thing that is part of that is that community sort of, are you LDS or aren't you? And then it's also, the people reporting on the case and the family, are you part of that? I don't want to call it an inner circle, but are you part of that or are you not part of that? So it has actually been quite a difficult case to cover in a sense. So I've got to sort of touch my phone every now and then, otherwise it goes off. I'm not quite sure what that's about. Zircon says, I'm in southern Arizona. Not sure where that is. I'm in Flagstaff. Okay. Kerry says the Valor case is really in your face on YouTube. The stalk, just not as much. I was under the impression the Valor case was covered less by creators. That is my impression. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a little bit of a script that I prepared. But I do think what's quite interesting, obviously, it is pretty clear. I mean, it's not a mystery. What the two female defendants have in common is that they're both women, right? It's been some time since we've dealt with female murder suspects and also female child killers. Letecia Stauch convicted, Laurie Vallow allegedly, and so we've been used to dealing with people like Chris Watts, and yet so a man who should be protecting his children and he doesn't. Well, now we've just dealt with two women, right? And I kind of get the feeling that that women judge that a lot more harshly, that women judge women who kill children a lot more harshly than men. Do you guys agree with that or not really? Just because it's so much the role of women to be nurturers. Not that it's not the role of men, but it just seems more abominable. I'm asking the question. If you disagree, you're welcome. I'm saying, doesn't it seem that that the people who follow true crime are more shocked at a woman murderer of a child than a male? And especially Letecia Stark, I mean, what happened there was pretty horrific. Just on the scale of one little life was pretty horrific. It's kind of unfathomable, right? So that's the first thing that I think is quite interesting, that both these defendants are female. Obviously, in the Laurie Vallow case, there are actually other male actors, allegedly, right? But what I find particularly scary and horrific in the Laurie Vallow case is, I don't know what is worse: a woman killing her child, or a woman convincing a relative or somebody else to kill your child and then bury your child in wherever. I'm not really sure what's worse. Like, to me, and then you sort of have a sexual undercurrent to that. To me, the teacher Stow case is horrific. I've written a book about it. But the Laurie Vallow case takes things to another degree, because there's religion that's involved, and manipulation. There are all sorts of very weird relationships going on. It looks like there could even be something going on between the brother and the sister. So it's actually a very, very convoluted story, but I don't think the answer is to say it's so complicated, I can't understand it. The Murdaugh case is pretty complicated, and it was ultimately explicable. If I touch it with my pen, it doesn't work. Wonder why this time my phone is kind of going off screen every now and then. Maybe if I just leave it, I can just use the other screen. So anyway, that's the first point. Female defendants, and that's something I guess I've failed to convey to you guys. I've wanted to show you guys, explain to you guys just how terrible and catastrophic the Laurie Vallow case is. But what can you do when no one's really interested? I think I've had videos with 3,000 views, 5,000 views. What can you do? The other side to it, as I say, is it's so strange how it's dismissed as, so someone commits these terrible, terrible crimes, and then it's dismissed as, oh, she's crazy. Is that the answer? Is she crazy? Because have I now disappeared off here? Yeah, it looks like I've got to keep my phone on, otherwise I'll disappear. Really don't understand why this is happening. Okay, so it seems to be a, what do you call it? It's strange that Letecia Stark also relied on the same thing. I did something really, really bad, so I must be crazy, and that's my way out. You kind of had the same thing with Gabby Petito. Gabby Petito was acting crazy, so Brian Laundrie's off the hook, kind of thing. Do you remember that? And it seems to be something that is acknowledged by both men and women. And I don't think it's really appropriate. I don't know what you guys think. It's not really appropriate. New comments. And, if you say what John Hammers just said, talking about the whole zombie thing, it's not, it's nonsensical, but there's nevertheless a system behind that. I mean, it's as nonsensical as Chris Watts having an affair and then saying, I can't get a divorce, I've got to commit murder. It's equally nonsensical. No one says, well, he's crazy, let's not think about it. Let's not look at what is really going on, what he's really trying to achieve, what he's really going after, what he really wanted for himself, right? Okay, right. So Leticia's been found guilty on all charges. And since the murder of a little boy is partly intertextual to the Laurie Vallow case, I think it's fair to say that a legal shockwave has, as opposed to a spiritual one, has sort of made its way from Colorado to Idaho. And if Laurie has any sense, she might be considering the possibility, and even her lawyers might be considering the possibility that what happened to Letecia might happen to Laurie. You've got to be thinking that that thought is at the top of their minds, right? Um, could Laurie be found guilty on all charges as well? Is it just a matter of time? So I'd be interested to know if any of you have been following the Carol says, I think the Chris Watts case was the worst so far. So Carol, I just want to deal with that comment. Chris Watts, um, did what he did, and he killed his wife, he killed his two children, and his wife was pregnant, basically four people. And then Chris Watts went to jail, so that's five people. In the Laurie Vallow case, right? In the Laurie Vallow case, there's Charles, who's dead, Alex, who's dead, Tammy, who's dead. We haven't even gotten to the children yet. Then there's JJ. Then there's Tylee. We're already at five. But then in terms of the destroyed lives of, you could say, the perpetrators, you've got basically two or three suspects, maybe even more. There were also attempted murders that add to that. Can you see how it's kind of different? You're also involving other people in praying and prayers in terms of wanting to say that that person's got a demon in them. And one does wonder if this wasn't stopped where it was stopped, how many more people would have died, right? Because Chad was basically saying, oh, that person's got a dark spirit. That person's got a dark spirit. Where would it actually have stopped if it didn't stop there? Anyway, it's maybe a pointless argument to say that one crime is actually worse than another because one person's life is just as valuable as another person. You know, I think what I find very troubling with the Laurie Vallow case is how someone else seems to commit a crime on behalf of someone else. That to me is 10 times worse. And because you double in other words, one person has a criminal psychology, but they then infect another person, and that person then also becomes either an accessory or a murderer, right? In other words, one monstrous person makes another person a monster as well. That I also consider kind of a casualty. Um, I wrote a book on Patrick Frazee, Murder Most Foul, and I also found that to be one of the most horrific cases I've ever covered. And one of the horrific parts was that he kind of recruited his mistress to clean up the crime scene. And someone sort of participating in a cover up of a murder of a woman participating in the cover up of a murder of a woman is and such and a murder like that is it's hard to kind of um, believe actually when you know actually what happened there. The other thing that I want to uh, talk about is this idea that this person's crazy and this person um, has this or that excuse. And I paid a lot more attention recently to the Laurie Vallow case, and you hear explaining over and over again to different people. I can't tell you right now what the situation is. Um, JJ's in a safe place. I can't tell you right now what happened to him, right? In other words, it's like I'm holding the cards, but one day when you know what happened, you'll understand. And then when it comes down to it, Letecia offers zero defense. Laurie also looks like she's going to offer zero defense. We saw the same thing in the Patrick Frazee case. And so what that really reminds me of is, have any of you guys been to Universal Studios, where you go through the lots and then you see some of the facades of the buildings that are sets? Have any of you seen that? Thanks for that comment, Carol. So Sally says, I have. So Sally, have you seen this particular, let me just do this. Have you seen this particular thing at Universal Studios? Let me just put that over there. Can you guys see that? Okay. Can you see over there on the right? That's just a facade, right? And although I don't think that's news to anyone, we've all seen that sort of thing before. What I think is quite interesting is how you have Letecia coming up with all these elaborate things, but when it comes down to a trial, she has literally zero defense. She's got nothing to say for herself, right? She's got, I don't know if you remember in the early days of the Stout case, Letecia was on Facebook and she was making all sorts of explanations, and she was even on television. In trial, that facade is like paper thin, right? And the same thing applies to Laurie. You've got this whole thing about zombies and this, that, and the other thing. But when you're sitting in court, okay, well now's your chance to explain what all of this is about. And what do you have? You have a facade that is like paper thin. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's interesting that it's not just criminals that are trying to deceive us. It's also Hollywood. You might say the one thing is got nothing to do with the other. Well, it does have to do with deception. And what is very interesting going through Universal Studios, Notcher says the fact that Murdaugh managed to operate with near impunity, he also kind of had a facade. And the dog video basically tore that whole facade down, right? But him constructing that alibi, that was a facade with very little backing it up. So yeah, like a deck of cards. So the other thing that was quite interesting when we went through this, these sets and all these facades, they were telling us that some doors are actually constructed smaller in order to make some of the characters bigger. I don't know if you guys know, John Wayne was apparently quite a small man. So as a cowboy, that they were trying to find ways of making him look bigger. The other people that are real tough guys are also not particularly big, like Arnold Schwarzenegger is not actually a big 6-foot Hulk. Tom Cruise is also not a very big guy. So there are all sorts of things that they do to make it appear that they're bigger than they are. It might be a camera angle, sometimes they wear shoes, but in terms of this set, they would actually, not this particular set here, just another set, they would actually construct the doors and make them smaller to make the person look bigger. Another thing that they do, and they call it forced perspective, they will actually purposefully make the windows that are higher up smaller so that the building looks taller than it really is. And I found that whole thing of forced perspective really interesting because criminals do that all the time. Criminals try and give you a forced perspective. And it takes someone who knows true crime or who knows these cases quite well to tell the difference. I'm talking about when you've never seen a criminal and you don't know whether they've committed a crime or not. It takes someone who's got the intuitions who are on the ball intuitively to pick that sort of thing up. Another kind of forced perspective is some of the roads on these sets curve slightly, so it makes it look like the road is longer. I just found all of that really interesting, the subtle ways that they create visual deception. But the most applicable to true crime, I think, is this facade, where you have this thing that at face value looks right, feels right, everything's right about it. But as soon as you change your perspective, as soon as you walk around the side, you see it is paper thin, basically. There's nothing behind it. And so how can you poke holes to that facade? Well, by asking certain questions, by changing your perspective. And the same applies to a crime scene. A crime scene at face value looks a certain way. How can you poke through that facade? Well, by changing your perspective. No, he's not a big guy. Okay. So let's continue. But by the way, this is a let's actually see what you guys think about this particular picture. What do you guys think of this? What do you guys think of that? That Thank you so much, Fractured Fairy Tales. What do you guys think of that picture? Bearing in mind what you've just spoken about. Someone says they fixed it with falling apart. Okay, I'm waiting for. Okay, so what you're seeing there is also, yeah, there we go. What you're seeing there is also a facade. That's not actually Hollywood behind me. It's a poster of Hollywood. There you can see the flash shining off the poster. So I'm not actually in front of the Hollywood sign. That's also a facade, right? And we are actually being manipulated in many ways. Marketing, when you book a hotel, you see certain things, and when you buy a burger, you're told it's going to look like that. In so many ways, we are kind of manipulated. When you see a travel brochure and you see this beautiful beach with no one on it, when you get there, it's totally different, right? So we need to kind of think beyond the visual, and that's also why I say, um, guys, if a crime is being broadcast on YouTube and that's the only reason you're going to pay attention to it, that's fine. You can do that, but in your own life, you're only going to pay attention to the things you see. Then, like that, these facades that I'm showing you, are you going to be able to see beyond the facade? Because one of the things with the Laurie Vallow case is it's a semantic trial. It's a semantic case, and as a result, it's very cerebral, and it's a great case to think about lots of different aspects. There's so many dynamics. There's the sister brother dynamic. Um, there's the future husband-in-law brother dynamic. There's the dynamic between whichever person and God. But there are so many dynamics that's really interesting. There's the uncle niece dynamic. There's the dynamic of a child that has autism, and that's another similarity between the Gannon Starr case and Laurie Vallow. You've got two little boys that both have let's just call it a difficulty or a challenge, and it's interesting that at the same time you had two mothers who basically seemed to just throw up their hands and say, "Can you just take him away?" I wish someone would take him away. Paddy says there's so much more that goes unseen. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on a little bit. So the other thing that really stood out to me when I went on this universal thing was they were saying that they need a controlled environment to control reality. They need a controlled, this is the movie business. They need a controlled environment to control reality and perceptions of reality. And I thought that's so true as well with true crime, that the perpetrator needs also a controlled environment. You saw that very much with Laurie Vallow and Chad Daybell and how they controlled the people around them with certain stories. And a big way that criminals control the environment is through storytelling, putting up all sorts of different facades. Um, and so in an excessively controlling situation, your perception of reality can be affected. And that is why it's important that you recognize people who are trying to control you, and also if you're trying to control somebody else. Because that often is about controlling reality. And reality is something that can't be controlled. Reality is what it is. And so people who are trying to control reality are actually trying to manipulate you. So like these sets that you see here, Hollywood is trying to control it so that they can do such a good job of affecting your perception of reality. And you sort of follow this train through all sorts of sets, and you see, oh, there's Psycho, and oh, there's the set of what is it, War of the Worlds, and this set and that set and the next, and they're all right next to each other, but all of them are controlled environments, and all of them are to deal with your perceptions of reality. So from my latest analysis on the Vallow case, it's difficult to imagine any of the criminal behavior could have taken place without the sexual aspect. The sexual aspect is also kind of control. Chris Watts was under a certain amount of control, I think, when he committed the crime, right? He was, but he was also controlling the narrative. He was saying how he's going to bed early and this and that and the next thing. But sex is definitely one aspect where you see control in a true crime scenario. So where it has an impact in the outcome of a particular case. And I think you could argue in the Stow case, Letecia was upset because she was stuck with Gannon. In other words, Gannon was getting in the way of her getting laid or whatever it is. I think she even Googled that. So in other words, and that is in like the animal kingdom, that is a big thing. When there are certain offspring in a scenario, sometimes that leads to animals killing the offspring, usually a male, in order for there to be new offspring and new, all that kind of thing. You see it with quite a lot of animals, with lions. I think wolves do it too. I'm not sure if bears do it, but we see it also very, very in a very, very explicit way, I believe, in the Laurie Vallow case, where you basically have a situation where Chad wants to marry Laurie, but he's actually still married. And Laurie wants to marry Chad, but she's actually still married, right? And so I just want to look at this. And then what do? Well, then suddenly a lot of people die. Children die, spouses die, right? And what is happening there? I want sexual control. I want sexual access, but also want sexual control. I don't want this person getting in the way, right? And so I think one's got to ask, who is responsible for that sexual aspect? Who is in control of that? And that's in terms of the Vallow case. It's equally difficult to imagine any of the criminal behavior taking place without the so-called spiritual aspect. That's in terms of the Vallow case as well. The set design of the Laurie Vallow case, the spiritual setups, who is responsible for that? Who is in control of that? If you took that away, if you took that set design away, what would the story have been? If you took away those facades, what would the story have been? And so I think one's got to say, in terms of this case, ultimately, who is in control of what, right? If you think about Hollywood and you're trying to make a movie, you've got to have control over these sets so that you can make your movie. The same applies to a crime. In order to commit the crime, and if you've got multiple perpetrators, then, and that is what I find so interesting about the Vallow case. In the Letecia style case, it's just, did Letecia commit this crime or not? In the Laurie Vallow case, it's sort of, who is responsible for what? Where does the criminal thing actually come from? How did one person influence another? Why did that person go along with it? And one theory is that Alex is actually somewhat impaired himself, that he was in a serious car accident, hit his head, and was somewhat of an impaired individual, and as a result became Laurie's sort of lapdog in a way, right? Jazzy Boop says, I'm trying to understand what the F is happening with 3 freaking cases right now with people committing crimes against children. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So I want to go on to Kohberger, but I first want to just mention what's really interesting with some cases are that they are semantic cases. Let's do that. And I find those particularly interesting as a writer, as a storyteller. I find them very interesting. One of the most famous examples of a semantic case is the John Benet Ramsey case with the ransom note, where words are used to cover a lot of things happening. I think the Madeleine McCann case is also kind of a semantic case. Words are used to cover or to address certain things. And I think the same applies to the Laurie Vallow case. In other words, these facades are facades of words, often. They're facades of words. And so how do you go and see that it is a facade? How do you walk around the side and determine that what you're seeing is a facade? Like, how do you do that? And the answer is you juxtapose the statements that people make. You put the statements that people make side by side, and that's how you see how one-dimensional they are. So in terms of the Laurie Vallow case, let's just ask the question, ultimately, who is in control of what? If it's a case about semantics, about storytelling, who is in charge of that? And I think you might then say, Chad. Chad was telling stories, so like, who was in charge of the story? Who was in control of the story? Chad. Yes, but who was pulling Chad's strings? Chad was telling a story, and you kind of get a sense of Chad's storytelling when Laurie says things like, what? they're not at zero yet, or kind of you can kind of see how she's nudging him in a particular direction. Chad's telling Laurie what she wants to hear. And so you've also got to think about that. If there's a storyteller telling an audience what they really want to hear, who's really pulling the strings? The storyteller or the audience? Who is getting Chad to apply the doomsday narrative to a personal narrative? That's also very important. That this dude, like, what's so crazy about the Chad and Laurie case is it's like doomsday, but it's all doomsday applied to their own family. Doesn't doomsday apply to like everybody? Doesn't it apply to like beyond your house or your neighborhood? Can you have like neighborhood doomsday? What about, isn't doomsday supposed to be like global? And so what is so funny about Chad's doomsday is it kind of applies to mostly to family members. And so the question is, who is getting Chad to apply the doomsday narrative to a personal narrative? Because that's what the Laurie Vallow case is, right? But equally, that tends to be what any apocalyptic narrative becomes: personalized and customized. Okay, I was actually also the recipient of doomsday beliefs as a teenager in far-flung South Africa. I don't know if any of you survived that. It was hard to believe, like, sometimes when I was despairing, I would sort of look at the sidewalk and I would think, how is this sidewalk gonna become fire and brimstone? Because that's what I'm being led to believe. This sidewalk in the middle of nowhere, is that gonna kind of become fire and brimstone? Okay, how? Practically how? And that's just another example of a facade or in terms of storytelling. Anyway, let's go on to the Kohberger case. And I actually took a photo of these stairs. This is the stairwell at Kohberger's apartment. And I just wanted to, let me make it full screen. I just wanted to kind of get a sense of what what was his world? Where did he set his, when he went to class and when he arrived home, where did he set foot? Where did he place his hand on this railing? Just kind of getting an intimate sense of his world. In other words, change my perspective to his perspective. Change my sense of reality to what is it like to be in somebody else's shoes, right? And then I also took this picture, and it's just right outside his apartment. If you go down the steps, that's what he would have walked on. So, we're so used to journalists taking photos of, you know, looking in towards the apartment. I was just wondering, what would he see when he comes out the door and it's another day and he's heading out into the world? And so that is why I took this photo. So I blow it up a little. And all that really is about perspective, changing perspective. Well, anyone saying the end is nigh and sort of telling you about it, that person's going to be very important, because what is more important than knowing, it's like if you're going to catch a flight, it's probably quite important to know what day, what airline, what gate. Well, doomsday is like, well, you're going to catch a flight either to heaven or hell. You might want to know which boarding gate to go to and which one not to go to, right? Okay, so here's another here's another perspective, less dreary, I hope. Uh, it's just down the path. So as you drive out of there, you see this sort of guide, map, and it's building G that he stayed in, and there's kind of an empty uh, call box there, and there's some bicycles over here. I'll show that to you in a second. So this is from the other side. So there is it's like an empty call box. There's no telephone on the inside. Um, there's some kind of kids' bicycles. There are a lot of families that stay here, and as a result, Kohberger probably didn't have many friends because there weren't really many people his age there. And so this to me is quite an eerie image. Anyway, what I showed you earlier, that is what you see when you step out. And just giving a little bit of a sense of what he saw in his world. And if you think it's dreary, well, I'm sure he thought it was dreary as well. Now, I've kind of been thinking about Kohberger quite a lot. And the latest thing that's happened is he was pulled over by a cop, and I was quite surprised that a lot of people said that they thought he was completely reasonable and sort of just a completely normal thing. Let's do a quick poll here. Um, do you feel the same way? Do you sort of feel Kohberger did nothing wrong? You would have done the same thing under the circumstances. I'd just be interested to see what you guys say. Iceland says I've got to get back to work. Good to see you, Iceland. Take care. Mel says Kohberger's university world was barren or something, lonely and barren. Don says lots of flags. Good to see you, Don. So, um, what I want to kind of just share with you is um, I've had some strange and unusual insights into Kohberger's interior monologue, not only by visiting his apartment in Pullman, the outside at least, but also the mere fact of driving from state to state to state. I mean, when I drove from basically LA to Flagstaff, you see how people are driving. It's quite a lot faster than what people drive from, say, Boise to Jackson Hole. Um, right? Um, there are there are a lot of things that are very different. For example, um, the roads were pretty rough. There's sections where trucks would literally bounce on the road. There are lots of little idiosyncrasies from one place to the next, and you kind of got to adapt. Like I'm definitely not from here, so I'm kind of learning what the culture is of driving in this particular place. What is the attitude of people um, patient? Are people impatient? Are they speeding? Are people reckless? Um, is there is the pace of traffic slow or fast or whatever? And and so I think when you in a different place and you say, yeah, well, where I'm from, blah blah blah. I don't know if that can really work because you're not where you're from. You're somewhere else. Does that make sense? Havanessa mom says he was passive aggressive. So I don't know. I actually got a lot of unfollows. I don't know whether people disagreed with what I said about that, or if they didn't like me saying I'm in California. I don't really know what it is, but I'm kind of going to go there and just talk about that aspect. Um, and I kind of heard a lot of people saying, there's no big deal about keeping a intersection free. I was in a serious car accident when I was 18 years old, where someone crossed over into the intersection. They were crossed over and they were waiting for the cars to pass. And then when the traffic light changed color, they didn't look to see who was coming. They were just like, oh, okay, I now have the right of way. And they didn't have the right of way, turned in front of me, and I had a very bad, I really badly injured my knee. And it's still kind of, 30 years later, it's still kind of bad. It's still an injury that I can kind of feel, right? Um, so this idea of keeping the intersection clear, maybe it's never affected you, and maybe you don't think it's a big deal. What's the most serious car accident I was involved in? Um, had it been kept clear, I wouldn't have been in this accident. And this person also ran a red light because the light changed and they were forced to go. They couldn't reverse. So they drove into me, right? So to be fair, context does count when you are somewhere else. And what I think people are forgetting is that wasn't Kohberger's first day in Pullman. He'd been there for weeks and actually months. And I can tell you, I was in Pullman for a day or an afternoon, and I was in Moscow for 2, 3 days. And I can tell you that you start to notice certain things. The roads are narrower. This road is closed. This, that, and the next thing. And so, if you make a mistake, um, and it's your first time there, I can understand that. But if you've been there for weeks on end, is it really a mistake? Is it really a mistake? Um, there are a couple of times where I'm driving and I realize the navigator says go that way, but I've actually gone too far, whatever it is, and then you sort of cross over a solid line. And it's actually an illegal move, but you sort of, I actually need to go this way. Sometimes, like getting to this hotel, I took a wrong turn and I ended up driving probably 20 minutes. I mean, that's a totally different story. But sometimes when you see cheapest, I need to go, that's when you go that it can save you a lot of trouble. But it's also not right. You then defend yourself. Now, I always feel like it's important when you have this conversation where you say, well, you're kind of pointing a finger at someone else and you're saying, he did that, to also address the question to yourself. So I'm going to do that. And some of you are going to laugh and some of you are going to be disgusted. But I think it's quite important, this idea of when you are somewhere else, and Kohberger wasn't in Pennsylvania, he was in Pullman. When you're somewhere else, you need to respect the fact that you aren't at home anymore, and you need to acknowledge that people do things differently where you are, and not impose your standards and rules on other people. Or you can try doing that and you'll see how far you get. You're probably going to be quite unhappy and you're going to make enemies, right? Whereas if you adopt the attitude that here things are different, I need to adapt, I need to pay attention and adapt, then you're going to be happier because you are adapting. You're not going to be rigid, you're not going to be stuck, you're going to be, adapting the way that you should be adapting. So I want to give you a little example of where I was a little rigid, and let's see what you guys think about it. Some of you, as I say, are going to be disgusted. Some of you are going to be amused. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is this idea of when someone points out, when someone says you did something wrong, do you argue back? And is that argumentative? Is it condescending? Is it warranted? Which one is it? What kind of person are you? Sometimes maybe you're right. You've got a good point. You argue back. But again, if you're in a different neighborhood, if you're in a different place, can you apply your standards to that different place? And it's kind of a difficult thing in a way. It's kind of a difficult question. I think one could apply that question in a spiritual sense to Laurie, Valo, and Chad as well. Anyway, let's continue here. So context does count when you're somewhere else. So, for example, my expectations when staying at an Airbnb are vastly different from those in other places. So let me put you guys in the ballpark. When I pay for cleaning services in my country, it's extremely cheap. It's about $20 for the whole house completely clean, dishes washed, floors vacuumed, washing done, washing ironed, everything, right? $20. And so if you make it 2 weeks, that's about $40, right? Here in America, you pay about 5 times that much at an Airbnb. In other words, $200. And so a place that I stayed at an Airbnb, the guy said in a review about me, said, Nick's a great guy, but I wish he'd read the instructions or something. And then his cleaner actually sent his images. So this is the stove. So the cleaner sent this image and said, look how messy this guy left the stove. Let me make it full screen. And it's not clean. What that is a kind of a soup spoon. And I think I did wipe something over here, but it certainly is dirty, right? But anyway, the point is the cleaner took photos and said, look how messy the South African left the apartment. Right? And my response is, cheapest, if I'm paying $200 for cleaning, surely the cleaner needs to do some work. Like, surely, am I supposed to do all the cleaning and when they come in, they just, I don't know, flush the toilet or something, right? So that's the, if I wanted to put up a facade, I'd stop there, right? You guys would say, gee, but I don't understand that. That's crazy. Well, here's a dirtier picture. This is of the basin, right? We're going to get to Murdaugh after this. So this is quite a dirty basin, right? And I'm the first to admit that that doesn't look great, and I'm not proud. I'm not proud of that, right? But if you think about it, there are really only about 3 plates in that basin. There's one, there's another one, and that might be another one. 3 plates in 2 weeks. And then quite a lot of coffee cups. This was a prepaid, what do you call it? Prepackaged meal. And I just, not quite sure what happened. It definitely doesn't look too good, but I threw some water in there. But basically, there are 3 plates in this basin, 3 plates. Can the cleaner not clean the 3 plates? So if the cleaner is taking photos of this and saying, what a mess. Okay, so cleaner, what are you going to do? Like, if you expected a completely clean basin, then what are you being paid $200 for? Right? But that's kind of like not the point. The point is that's the rule of the Airbnb. That's the rule. That's the way things are done. And as crazy as it is to me, I mean, the price to me, the fact that you're paying $200, 5 times more, and you get nothing out of it. In other words, you're paying for cleaning, but nothing ever gets cleaned for you, right? That doesn't make any sense as far as I'm concerned. But that's not the point. Whether it makes sense or it's expensive, this is how it's done over here. That's the bottom line. And if I was imposing my my standards or my situation here, you're gonna have difficulties. You've got to kind of go, this is how things are. I did write back to the guy and I said, I did actually take out the garbage. I did actually leave behind a box that was 3/4 full of coffee things. I did leave behind 3 Coronas. Maybe I deserve a little bit of credit for that. Anyway, I just personally find it odd that a cleaner goes into somewhere to clean, and instead they take photos like it's a crime scene. It's like, I found something dirty. I shouldn't be cleaning this. Like, my job is to not clean that stuff. My job is to photograph things that someone else was supposed to clean instead of me. In other words, the cleaner should be a dirt photographer. I don't know, anyway, just a bit crazy. So what I'm kind of, and I mean, what's different between Kohberger and me is I'm not I'm not really a messy person. So it's not like I'm messy in general and I'm arguing for that. I've just stayed for a few days at my friend in California. Nobody told me to wash dishes or clean up after me, and I did. I looked at what they were doing in their home, and that's what I did when I was there, right? I actually said to Webb, I said, how come I never ever see a dish lying around? And he said, well, because the kids know when they wash something, they must put it away. But I asked that after I was doing that already. So I'm not like coming into it with a guilty conscience, although I do feel a bit dirt shamed by this. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Thanks a lot. That's totally different to someone who is possibly premeditating a murder, someone who's stalking. It's like they're doing all of that, and he must know that what he's up to is no good. I mean, he's already out of favor with the his faculty. He's kind of a pariah in his community, and so him giving the cop a hard time is just yet another version of that. And that's where I think I differ from a lot of folks who looked at that. Is contextually, we know what he was doing at his college at the time that this was taking place. So I think it's a little strange and a little naive to say, I don't see anything wrong with what he's doing, when he should actually be kind of owning up to what is going on. So in other words, had that cop stopped him and he basically said, wow, I am actually in the wrong here. What if that psychology spread to other areas of his life? What if this idea of, wow, maybe I should actually do things differently? Well, maybe I need an attitude adjustment or whatever it is, right? That could have prevented that malaise of thinking, if that's what happened here, from spreading to other areas, right? In exactly the same way that applies to us in our lives, where something happens and you get called out, that's an opportunity to correct our behavior, or it's an opportunity to say, I'm going to in future ignore these signals. Thanks a lot, Rolana. Thanks very much. Bella Ann, good to see you. Linda says, Kohberger was all information at that traffic stop. Yeah. And you kind of got the sense that he can't help himself. He's got to, like, we've heard it over and over again. If you know Kohberger's story, you know that since he was in high school, he always had to prove that he was smarter than everyone else. That's been a big thing his whole life, that he's got to show that he's the smartest person in the room. That's exactly what you see there. And what I find quite surprising is some people don't see that, and I think they don't see that because they've forgotten some of the things that we found out about Kohberger. There's been a bit of a gap, and so that's Kohberger. That's classic Kohberger, proving that he's the smartest person in a conversation. The problem with that whole idea that Kohberger is better than everyone else, that Kohberger knows better, is you take that seed, you take that thing, and you take that into the Idaho 4 thing. You take that into the Idaho student killings, and you ask yourself, is this a crime that is based on someone trying to teach someone else a lesson? Is it based on someone trying to demonstrate that his intelligence is superior, right? And in a smaller way, is this a brazen person, someone who's trying to be brazen? And if you think about it, anybody saying I'm smarter than you, and I mean, I felt when I wrote back to the Airbnb guy and I said, you know what, I actually did leave you a box. It's quite expensive, a box with coffee capsules in, and I left lots of cans of Truly. That doesn't sound really, very good, does it? And a couple of Coronas. Um, Although I'm making a case, and although it's valid, it's also being a little bit cheeky in a way. It's kind of you did something wrong, take it on the chin kind of thing. And so in other words, what I'm saying is it's a little brazen making a retort like that. In Kohberger's case, it's extremely brazen in the middle of a potential premeditation to get the attention, to get the what's the word, to possibly awaken the ire of this police person. Because can you imagine if a month later, or whatever it is, a month later, a police memo circulates where they say, we're looking for the driver of a white Elantra. And obviously this officer is going to say, I remember a weirdo who wanted me to actually check the law. Nobody else asked me to do that. I remember a weirdo and he was in a white Elantra. Thanks, well done, Kohberger, for making yourself memorable there. Why did he do that? Because he couldn't help himself, right? So part of that is a default setting. Part of that is kind of a brazen thing. But I think the brazen thing makes up for he's actually got a very weak sense of self. So the brazen thing is meant to convey strength. It's kind of a semantic, what do you call it? It's conveying, it's again a facade made of semantics that I'm brazen, I'm bold. Well, behind that is not really very much. What does Law Nerd say? Law Nerd says, Bella says, the look on his face is someone who believes he knows it all. Pam says, I find Laurie to be the worst type of murderer. I really agree with that. Of course, it's still innocent until proven guilty. We don't know. He still hasn't been convicted in a court of law. So just be aware of that. I agree with that. A lot of people have been saying that Brian is such a clever guy. I think he's trying to be clever. I think that's part of his identity, but I don't actually think he is clever. Okay, what else do I want to say here? So a couple of questions. Was Kohberger argumentative? Right? And so you can ask that question within the traffic stop thing. Just within that, was Kohberger argumentative? Whatever your answer is, you can then take that same question and say, was Kohberger argumentative within the college setting? Was he argumentative when students said, you're grading us too harshly? And then you can take that into another area and say, was Kohberger sort of kicking against the wall in terms of his social relationships? Did he want to, meet women or whatever? Did he want to socialize? And maybe argumentative is not the word, but his neighbors said when he saw Kohberger coming down, coming along the walkway, he sort of tried to avoid him, not because Kohberger was argumentative, but because he was so loquacious. He was speaking so much, right? So I think if your first instinct is to say, in terms of that traffic stop, that is not argumentative, well, he's argumentative otherwise. He doesn't have very many friends otherwise. He has had problems with people in another way, right? And so isn't he argumentative? Isn't he a difficult person? Or kind of just someone who's quite prickly? It's kind of hard to be nice to him, and it's hard for him to be nice to people, whatever it is. So these are the three questions I want to put into chat. And it's, was he argumentative? Was he brazen? And then you kind of reflect that back. Am I argumentative? Right? Not me, although you're welcome to say that, but are you argumentative? And so just think about, there you go. Alina says, I think it's normal to try and talk yourself out of a ticket. Is it normal to ask what the law is? I tend to kind of disagree a little bit, because the police officer said, I saw you do that. And he kind of said, well, what was I supposed to do? Back up. And she kind of said very early on, you've got to keep this intersection clear. I do agree with you that it's normal to, I've been driving quite a lot, and occasionally you wonder, if you see officers along the side of the road, you wonder, was I speeding? And you kind of automatically thinking, I was driving a new vehicle today, a vehicle I haven't driven before. It took me a while to actually figure out how to put the digital speedometer display on the central console. So, you could see the analog thing, but I'm used to a digital display. So I couldn't often see exactly what speed I was going. Now I have, though. Now the digital speed is there, but I was thinking, if I get into any trouble, then I will definitely say that. I'll say, you know what, I couldn't tell exactly what speed I was going. I'm sorry. Well, now I don't have that excuse. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about Murdaugh in a moment. My door open. For me, the bottom line is, you should do as is the custom where you are. And it might not be so apparent if you're going from one American state to another. But it's very, like, I've lived in other countries. I've lived in the UK. I've lived in South Korea. I'm now in America. And one way, if you want to have a stress-free travel experience, then adapt to where you are. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. If you want to have a nightmare, then take everything that you used to from home and impose it literally on everybody around you. Okay, so let's deal with Murdaugh. This is an excellent article in the Washington Post. I wonder how many of you read it. I think it was written by I'm not sure if it's a Pulitzer Prize winning uh, columnist, Kathleen Parker. Let me just make sure. I think she has won a prize for something. Yeah, I think she has won. She won the Pulitzer for distinguished commentary and $10,000. So that's for this. So I mean, I kind of noticed reading this article that it was just so well written, and I just want to highlight what she says. Even behind bars, Alex Murdaugh's story keeps changing his story. And you kind of got to wonder, why on earth is that happening? Why on earth, if he's been convicted, why on earth, why can't he just tell the truth? And I think the answer is because, first of all, murderers are always liars. And not only that, they always think that somewhere maybe there's a loophole for them. So in some little lie, they throw another spaghetti lie against the roof, maybe it'll stick. And so that's their default setting. And so that's what they do. They've been conditioned to lie kind of as a lifestyle. They know how to lie, they don't know how to tell the truth. So I think that's the answer. I just want to bring your attention to a couple of, yeah, that's interesting. It's been really interesting driving around California with a friend of mine who's got a Tesla, and I asked him, have you ever been stopped for a speeding for a ticket? And I think he said 20 years ago or something. But I said, I'd be really afraid if I was stopped. And he said, why? And I said, well, based on watching a lot of incidents. And so he said, well, basically what you should do is when you stop, put your hands on the steering wheel so that that it's clear where your hands are, right? I also thought it was quite interesting when Kohberger said, I'm going to reach for my, I think that was a way of saying, I'm going to move my hand now, right? And I think you know what that is about. But I don't see anything wrong with being a little afraid / respectful of the authorities. In other words, how would you feel if I came to America and I said, I'm not afraid of the police, and it doesn't really bother me if I get stopped, as opposed to not, I'm terrified, but I'm, I am kind of, I'd rather avoid that. I'd rather do what I need to do, obey the law and not get into trouble, right? Because I respect them and I do, and I'm also a little afraid of them. I'm kind of also afraid of there being a little bit of a miscommunication, which there sometimes is. People sometimes are like, I don't understand what you're saying, or, oh, you're not from America. But it could also just be a misunderstanding, and those have happened. And I would like to avoid that, right? What does Marcus say? It comes to something when you need to, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I would rather avoid that taking place. Yeah, no sudden movements. Okay, so in terms of Alex Murdaugh, I thought this is such a great comment from Kathleen Parker. She says, "It isn't over until, well, ever." And she's kind of been talking about after the murder case, there's now the civil case, and how long is that going to take place? And just that it's lie upon lie upon lie, and you kind of got the same feeling with Laurie Vallow, that if the police didn't catch or didn't find the bodies of the children, I don't think it would have been over ever either. It would just be lie upon lie upon lie. Same with Letecia Stout. So yet another paragraph I just want to highlight. Let's just do that. So Murdaugh has insisted for years that Satterfield tripped over the family dogs and fell down the front steps of the house. Now, bear in mind, he was supposed to have never been there, right? And so how could he be so certain? He wasn't supposed to be there, and yet apparently he was quite certain. And he said he knew this because she told him, only to say afterwards that she didn't tell him. So then if he says that that didn't happen, again, how can he be so certain? So she writes, he basically sued himself on behalf of her two sons for wrongful death and collected $4.3 million that he decided to steal rather than notify the sons of their good fortune. You kind of have a similar thing of, so here Murdaugh sues himself, gets the insurance. You have the same thing, a very secular way of making money in the Laurie Vallow case from insurance and social security. They weren't getting money from converts giving them money. They were getting money from people dying and the insurance turning straw into gold. It's so interesting that almost at the same time you've got three cases, each that are sort of inversions in a way. You've got the Murdaugh case, you've got a crooked lawyer, a lawyer who uses the law to favor himself. You've got the Kohberger case, a criminology student who maybe has used his knowledge of criminals and how they pursued and investigated to possibly get away with murder, right? So, you kind of have like an insider, someone who's supposed to be fighting for justice, fighting for good, turning bad. And then you've got Laurie Vallow and Chad, who's supposed to be, the good guys on God's side and doing the work of angels. Meanwhile, all they can do is turn people into demons and devils and do the devil's work. That's the part that I really didn't understand. It's like, so if someone's become a zombie, shouldn't you be trying to pull them back from the brink instead of push them over? Like their point seems to be that person's a zombie, so we need to like help them into hell. Like we need to just give them one last push, or we need to, take them. It's like, I thought you supposed to save people. I don't know. It's quite strange. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Next one. She writes, Murdaugh lied to nearly everyone in his orbit. During his murder trial, however, he confessed to several financial crimes that still haven't been litigated. So he lies to everyone, but in his trial, he actually confessed to crimes that kind of got him into trouble. And I thought Creighton Waters was pretty good with that, getting him to talk and talk and talk and talk. And, not that the hole that he's in can get much deeper. And then I thought this was such a great way to conclude this. And I'm about to wrap up as well. She writes here, assuming Murdaugh is finally telling the truth in this instance, why now? Only he and his lawyers know the answer, but the sudden discovery of a conscience often means a deal of some sort is in the making. Or maybe he's trying to get right with his maker. Lord knows he's made enough deals with the devil. And you get this very weird sense that, like, if you look at this picture of his face, that is someone who can't tell the truth. And then you see his attorneys beside him. Okay. So I just wanted to do that recap, and then also just want to talk a little bit about Gabby Petito. You know, it's very strange coming to America. As someone who's written dozens of books on true crime, as someone who's been a YouTuber covering Gabby Petito and um, the Murdaugh case, and um, you know, Laurie Vallow and the student killings in Idaho as well. It's very strange traveling through this incredible country into and out of sort of true crime history that I've written about. I mean, right now I'm in Arizona, and this is the area where Jodi Arias, she came from California as well, from Wairika, on her sort of surreptitious little jaunt, and went to Travis Alexander's home, I think in Mesa. I'm not going there. I'm going to the Grand Canyon, and but it's a weird feeling how you sort of feel your journeys intersecting with narratives that you've written about, narratives that you're aware of. But I've felt particularly um, I felt particularly close to Gabby Petito, or I don't know if that's the word. I felt her journey is really resonating with me because I feel how difficult it's been to be a creator. Like, I came to America to have a holiday, but also came to America to um, to try and improve my reputation as a credible and authentic voice in true crime. So, there was that aspect as well. And I've been quite, what's the word? I've been quite saddened by, going to all the effort to go to Boise, and no one's really, no, not no one, but people haven't really paid a lot of attention to that. And the unfortunate result of that is that you learn. And I mean, it's not something I don't know. The same thing happened in South Africa. I went to trials. I covered them. I stayed in hotels. I traveled up and down the country. It was really, really exhausting, and it people didn't really appreciate it. It's like, uh, do it. Be a keyboard warrior. That's good enough for us. And yeah, I mean, um, and it's nobody's fault. It's, there's no issue here. The thing is, just I can understand that Gabby was trying to do something, and it was very difficult. It was expensive. It was exhausting. She had someone with her that wasn't supporting her. Um, she yeah, and so I can understand that aspect. I can understand driving long distance. I can, there's so many places she went to that I went to as well, like boardwalks, just intuitively. And then you kind of get the sense that she's trying to paint a vivid um, portrait on her social media, But I think a lot of people at the time, obviously after she died, that they understood what was going on. But at the time, um, I don't think people really appreciated what she was doing, and I don't think Brian Laundrie appreciated what she was doing. Um, just like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If he succeeds, if he's threatened, if he doesn't, it's I told you so, right? Um, it just is very difficult combining travel kind of with social media. What I mean is you've kind of got to, how can I put it? You've kind of got to put up a facade somewhere. So either you're not going to be really traveling that much, you're going to spend a lot more time in a room somewhere, editing and putting things together. So in other words, you're not really traveling, or you're going to be traveling and the social media is going to actually fall apart. You're not going to be consistent enough. And so either way, it's kind of quite a difficult situation. You get what you get the point that I'm trying to make. Oh, Nisi's here. Good to see you. Popping in for bed to say you're so close in Flagstaff. I live in Prescott. Cool. I think I saw a sign to Prescott. Uh, Working memory says you need a huge social media following to be able to fund the travel costs. Yeah, that's right. Wow, someone else is in Flagstaff. Cool. So, so yeah, so for me personally, I really wanted to go to the Valo trial, and you know, because to me it's a crazy case. Suddenly this is going on and off again. I'm not quite sure what the story is. Anyway, and so I did that, and I'm so I'd really be interested in your feedback. I'm actually due to fly back to Boise on Sunday, which really tells me I'm going to miss the trial because the final arguments. Where's that? You guys know about. After consulting with my client, we don't believe the state has proven its case, so the defense rests. That's what Jim Archibald said today. So, so what I anticipate is going to happen is tomorrow is Wednesday. So I anticipate closing arguments for the full day on Wednesday. Then Thursday, the defense might have closing arguments. It might be half a day or none at all. Just, I don't know. Something tells me there will be closing arguments from them. And then something tells me the jury won't come back with a verdict on Friday. Maybe they will. But even if they do come back with a verdict, mustn't there still be sentencing? Mustn't there still be victim impact statements? So I was thinking of canceling my flight to, well, I can't actually because it's not a, you can't actually get a refund, but of canceling my stay in Boise. But something tells me there is going to be something going on next week. What do you guys think? Devin Sprites is blown away when I saw you travel to the trial. Thanks very much. Thanks. Oh, okay, so that's good. So I actually think what's going to happen is they want the weekend perhaps for jury deliberation or for jury, just the jury to think about it. So maybe Thursday the state will do closing arguments and maybe Friday the defense. What do you guys think? And then the verdict might come out Monday. Thanks a lot, Plain Iron. Thank you. I've also learned a heck of a lot about America, about being here, not just America, specific places in America. Um, Idaho, it was very interesting going to Moscow, going to Pullman, driving from Kohberger's apartment, um, and then straight to 1122 King Road. That was really interesting. Um, it was really interesting being in trial. It was pretty. I was hoping to actually bump into Brian Enton, but I think he arrived there after I left. I might see him if I'm there on Monday. Um, yeah, so it was quite interesting. But what's on like there's separate ways of looking at America. I came to America also to see the Van Gogh artworks in the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Met, and that was incredible. Just that on its own was pretty incredible. But what's really blown my mind is just going from state to state. It felt like a totally different world. Um, the weather's different, the people are different, the culture's different, the cities are different, the landscape's different, the time zone's different. So although I've been able to appreciate that somewhere else, that yeah, California is different to New York and this state and that, it's extremely different. And uh, I also kind of get a sense of the crushing sense of insignificance. If you live in America and you've got so much opportunity, you know, why aren't you living the American dream? When so many people are, when there's so many opportunities, part of part of that crushing sense of claustrophobia, I think, is because um, it is such a big place that it may sometimes feel hard to emerge out of it, and that may lead to like a desperate sense. So that's something else that sort of came out. And I really felt that driving from Jackson Hole to Rexburg, that change in culture, that there's some very poor um, areas, and no one knows poverty more than a South African. We've got extremely poor people in South Africa. We've got 30% people unemployed. But as rich as America is, there are some areas where people struggle. And it was so hard when one saw Chad's home in Rexburg, it was so hard to imagine him telling someone that he's like the Messiah, he's going to deliver the 144,000, that he's going to like save the world or whatever it is. That someone significant could come from such a ordinary um, little plot. It's not even part of Rexburg. It's a place called Salem. Um, an extremely nondescript, insignificant little place. And in a way, it's exactly that is the reason why I think he presents himself as this larger than life God figure. And Laurie also this larger than life goddess figure, because their actual lives are so ordinary and so small. She's a head of kind of a hairdresser that was 49 years old, and what do I have to show for it, kind of thing. And she wanted a better life. She wanted a bigger life. Well, this is one way to get there: storytelling, facades, fiction. Um, Working memories is the affluent here in America mostly live in the coast. I've got to say, when I drove with um, Webb through Brentwood, and we also went to where OJ lived, and drove through Malibu, it is pretty incredible how wealthy the wealthy are. It's incredible. Like, you kind of wonder, how did they do it? Some inherited, some worked hard. Um, it's so frustrating. I was so close to some rocket launches going on near Burbank. Webb said that you could go there at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever. Market says my experience of the US left me with two specific impressions. I was astonished by the polite, respectful courtesy. Yeah, I mean, I've found Americans to a fault very friendly, kind, um, thoughtful. I don't know. I found Americans a lot friendlier than I think I expected. Kind, yeah, yeah, makes sense. Thanks a lot, Bella Ann. Okay, so just a couple of other cases. So what is also quite strange was we drove around in a Tesla, so we actually had to stop quite often and recharge. And at one point, we stopped in basically Isla Vista, and I realized, wow, this is actually where Elliot Roger, this was the terrain that sort of gave rise to him, or that he, you know, um, did his thing in. And I've written a book about Elliot Roger Incel, and on our way back from um, what's it, Hearst Castle, and that's a story in itself. That's a story I really want to share with you guys as well. But on our way back from there, so I was photographing a pier, and it looks just like the pier that Gabby took photos of as well. Although it's not the same one, but it looked very similar. Um, I convinced Webb, let's go and watch a movie. And so on our way back, we stopped again in the sort of Isla Vista area, and we watched a movie, and we were surrounded by, like, most of the kids in the cinema were students, and I'm listening to them laughing, and I'm enjoying their youthfulness, but I'm also aware I wrote a book about Elliot Roger that happened here in this fabric. And then you drive a bit further, and you in Morro Bay, and you see these otters, doing whatever they're doing, and that these are scenes with those three chimney stacks that Kristen Smart would have seen, and also Scott and Lacey Peterson. I really wanted to go to Modesto, but going from Napa Valley to San Francisco, we ended up arriving home at 2 o'clock in the morning anyway, and it was raining. So that's the one place I'm meant to just go through. Also because George Lucas, I think, didn't George Lucas live there? Um, so yeah, so all of that, all of those stories that played out in California, it's quite weird moving through that and feeling different times and timelines and contexts. It's because, I mean, I wrote 3 books on O.J. Simpson. I wrote 1 book on Elliot Roger. I wrote 3 books on Scott and Lacey Peterson. So when I'm moving, and I was saying to Webb is basically saying, which dead body are we going to go and look at now? And it's quite a good point. Are you here to be alive and to enjoy the sunshine and the flowers and the scenery, or are you here to, what do they call it? Morbid tourism. And it's kind of hard for me not to be a morbid tourist because I've written about cases right through America. And so here I am in Arizona, and I'm not here to go and visit Mesa, Arizona, or Jody Arias. I'm not sure which prison she's in, but wherever. I'm here to see the Grand Canyon. While the Lori Vallow case is taking place, I'm going to be in Monument Valley, the final stages of it. So that's been quite hard. It's been hard to tear myself away from certain things, but it's also been interesting going through those, um, you know, going through that fabric and just feeling what it feels like. So coming to America has been a very strange experience, meaningful. Um, there's been a strange tension going on inside me where I'm challenging myself to let go of, I used to cover things. I used to be extremely dedicated and conscientious, and I'm trying to let go. And I'm also trying to also hold on, if that makes sense. I'm trying to know how much to let go and how much to hold on. and so I don't know. I guess when I get home, I'll decide, where to go from there. But I do actually intend to come back to America next year, maybe for a month, the year after, and just explore different parts of America. I really enjoy the country, and it's wonderful being in the first world. It definitely is. Okay. Yeah, so my plan is to go to Monument Valley and then to Moab. I think is it Moab Monument Valley or Monument Valley Moab? Not quite sure. And then head back to California. Of course, in Vegas, I also wrote about an event that took place in Vegas. Uh, Rod of God says California, as much as it's hated, is also loved as a centerpiece of US culture. As if you've got time, you should go out to the Navajo Nation. I drove for 7 hours today, more than 7 hours today. I think tomorrow is not as much driving. I'm hoping to do Van Gogh letters tomorrow. So let's see if that happens. And maybe show you some photos of the Grand Canyon and whatever. So for those interested, this is my Instagram page. And these are some of the kind of the last sort of images or the most recent images that I've put up today. I should really not have put fuel in California. I should have just waited till I was in Arizona. It cost $70 to fill up my vehicle. I think it. I think the previous vehicle cost $50. Quite a quite a lot more. That's kind of a view of what I've been seeing. So if you guys are interested in following my journey the next little while, you can follow me on Instagram. Anyway, that's my friend Webb. This was at Universal Studios. So I'll put a link in chat if you guys are interested. If I've been consistent in social media on any platform, it was definitely um, Instagram. YouTube not so much. Patreon I've also been pretty consistent. Okay, guys, that's it from me. It's been almost 2 hours, so I think that's okay. That's adequate. Thanks, Sally. So, Sally, if you like the Van Gogh series, check out the channel, the Team Peachtree channel, around about this time tomorrow. I can't promise. I don't know, if I meet some people or if I get caught up in the sunset or just running around all day, then I might not do that. But we'll see. Working Memory says, actually, I just saw a report about all the Lake Mead murders being found from, yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot. Good to see you, Terry. Terry and I met up in Seattle, and then we sort of moved down Oregon into Northern California. Terry says this is a great reminder to keep the scout mindset, ask questions, pay attention to the details. That's true in true crime, it's true in travel, and it's true generally. I am seeing some snow on the sort of caps of the mountains. I've seen snow all the way from LA to here, like all along the sort of the tops, the tips. I don't think it's going to be there for much longer though. Yeah. Last couple of questions. Marcus, glad that you caught it. I know you often don't because of where you are, but glad you made it. Thanks a lot, Mel. Thanks a lot, Erica. Thanks. Laura's good to see you here. I know you were wondering, where is Nick yesterday? And anyway, I'm glad you made it. Linda says, appreciate all your hard work. Thanks very much. So I'm going to be returning to New York. I'll be back in New York on about the 1st of June, and I'll be in New York for about 5 days. So if any of you are in the area, then we can maybe do a little get together at like a coffee shop or something. Maybe stroll around Central Park, whatever. So you've got a bit of a heads up. I'll be in New York from the 1st to the 5th. So if you, and I didn't get to see all of you, I do want to go and watch. I do want to go and see this. Go and look at the Statue of Liberty. So you guys want to join me on that little jaunt? That might be quite a good selfie, like TCRS selfie opportunity. Maybe we can do something with that. Farah says, do you ever sleep? Well, I'm about to sleep right now. I actually was very sleepy on the drive here. I realized how tired I was, so I really do need to sleep well now so that I can enjoy tomorrow. Kat Kruger, good to see you as well. Kat, do you think there's going to be any Laurie Vallow trial next week? Like, do you think it's all going to be concluded? I think it's the fact that tomorrow's a kind of a rest day means that because I know they always scheduled it for 8 weeks. So I don't know. I think you're going to see me back in Boise, and while the case is still happening. Ellis Island, okay. Yeah, the redwoods. I still want to talk to you about it. It was such a profound experience, and there's so much to say about it that I didn't want to do a slapdash thing. So I made notes. Where are my notes? Can you guys see this? I actually got like a nice yellow legal pad and just made some notes on them. There's another one here as well. So I'll be sharing this when I kind of get home and when I'm in one place and I can kind of share, sort of collate my thoughts and put it together. Should be quite cool. Thanks so much, Don. Whoa, I thought that was $5. Thanks very much. I actually got a photo sent to me of Timmy. Do you guys want to see it? Thanks so much, Don. Really appreciate that. And Nisi as well. I hope you're doing okay, you know, with the situation you guys are in, you and your sister. So are you saying if I go through Prescott, I must think of you? I will think of you. Let's see if I can show you that picture of Timmy just before I sign off. Can you guys see that? What does Cat say? So let's just get rid of the Murdaugh thing. So can you see Timmy? So that's what the peach trees are looking like right now. The one on the left is turning sort of yellow, and the one on the right, which is probably getting some more warmth from the wall, is doing quite well. And there's little Timmy. It is it is kind of sad. Although I've got to tell you, even when I'm with him, he goes to that gate and he looks out because there's sometimes cats walking there or whatever. But I'd like to think he's thinking of me. Yeah, so I am kind of missing him, and I'm thinking about like how on earth do you travel with a dog? You know, I couldn't have done this trip with Timmy just because I was in court quite a few days. But maybe it's possible in the future I will be able to. So I'll try and solve that problem. There are a couple of other photos that Terry took. Terry took this photo of the abominable beach man. Terry, do you remember that picture? And this is maybe a nicer picture without the abominable beach man. Photo courtesy Terry Dean. And then let's do this one as the last picture. Thanks a lot, Don. That's very kind of you. I do FaceTime with Timmy, but I sort of feel like I kind of worry that it actually traumatizes him, that he hears my voice and he's like, oh, you, well, where are you? Kind of thing, you know? Anyway, guys, I'm gonna call it a day, call it a night. I just want to thank all of you for joining me. I know it was very sort of short notice, but thanks very much for being here. Neecy, Terry, really good seeing you. Don as well. Thanks very much, guys, for the super chats. I'll try and be back tomorrow on the Team Peachtree channel with the Van Gogh letters. Maybe show you some picture of the Grand Canyon or whatever. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, by the way, there's some beautiful footage, a second video clip of otters handing over food to one another that Webb took with a really good Nikon camera. If you haven't watched that, make sure you check it out. So catch me on the Team Peachtree channel with Van Gogh letters tomorrow around about this time. Okay, thanks guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks a lot, Don. Thanks, guys. Good night. Sleep tight. Take care. See you tomorrow.